That night, as Isaiah's hands softly traced the curve of my face under the moonlight streaming through his bedroom window, I realized that everything I had feared about our age difference had been wrong. What I thought would make me feel small made me feel like a woman for the very first time. What he thought would make him a predator revealed a depth of tenderness I never knew existed in men. "Are you sure, Amara?" His voice was rough, filled with desire barely held in check, his dark brown eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my heart race. The moonlight caught the silver strands threading through his tight curls, highlighting the strong angles of his face and the concern written in every line. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back." I looked up at the man who had pulled me from a life of hopelessness. A man who had shown me what it truly meant to be cherished. He had spent weeks fighting his attraction to me out of respect for my youth. Isaiah Freeman, the billionaire, who could have any woman in the world, was trembling at the thought of touching me. His hands, steady in boardrooms where million-dollar decisions were made, now shook with the weight of wanting something he had convinced himself he shouldn't have. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man who made grown CEOs stammer with a single glance, reduced to asking permission from a 20-year-old girl who had been a broke college barista just months ago. But that's what made the moment perfect. That's what made everything we had fought through worth it. "I've never been more sure of anything," I whispered, my fingers moving to unfasten the buttons of his shirt, feeling the wild rhythm of his heartbeat. "I'm not the scared girl you rescued anymore. I'm a woman who knows exactly what she wants." What happened that night changed everything between us. The careful distance he had kept, the protective walls I had built, all of it dissolved in a night of passion that proved age is just a number when two souls recognize each other. He worshipped my body like I was priceless art, every touch filled with reverence, every kiss a sacred promise. I discovered something powerful that night, that innocence and experience could create something breathtaking together, that the fears we both held onto were nothing compared to the perfection of surrendering to love. The way he touched me like I might shatter, like I was spun from glass and moonlight, told me everything I needed to know about the man beneath his sharp suits and commanding reputation. This wasn't conquest. This wasn't possession. This was reverence. This was a 49-year-old man realizing love could make him feel young again. But our story didn't begin in that room. It started 3 months earlier, when a broken 19-year-old girl caught the eye of a man who had forgotten how to feel anything at all. It started with coffee shop glances and soft greetings, with the kind of slow-burning attraction neither of us wanted to acknowledge, with the slow realization that love doesn't always follow the rules the world writes for it. It started when two people who were all wrong for each other discovered they were absolutely perfect together. But before I tell you how that night happened, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Amara Bennett, and until 6 months ago, I lived a perfectly ordinary life. I was 19, a sophomore at Bayview State University, studying art history, sharing a tiny off-campus apartment with my best friend Tasha. My biggest worry was finding enough money for textbooks. My greatest joy was spending Saturday mornings in the campus art gallery, dreaming about curating exhibitions in cities like New York or Paris. My parents, Nadine and Gregory Bennett, had immigrated from Jamaica with nothing but grit and dreams. My dad worked construction, his hands always rough with calluses that told stories of buildings he'd helped raise. My mum cleaned offices at night, coming home with tired eyes but always asking about my classes, my passions, my future. Everything they did was for me, so I could have the education they never got. "Amara, baby," my mama would say, gently stroking my hair while I studied late into the night. "Knowledge is the one thing they can't take from you." But she was wrong. It happened on a rainy Thursday in March. A drunk driver ran a red light while my parents were on their way home from their weekly grocery trip. They died instantly. The police told me that like it was supposed to bring comfort, like dying on impact meant the pain was less, but all it did was leave a bigger hole in my chest. One minute I was texting my mum about what we should cook for dinner, and the next I was standing in a morgue identifying bodies. Everything smelled like disinfectant and grief. The funeral was a blur of white lilies and hushed condolences. Everyone in the church seemed to know my parents, the quiet, hard-working couple who never missed a Sunday, who sent money back to relatives in Kingston, who believed in the American dream with unwavering faith. Watching their caskets lowered into the ground, I felt like I was burying my entire future. The insurance money barely covered their debts. Suddenly, I was left with funeral costs I couldn't pay and a future that felt like a cruel joke. Everything I'd taken for granted, my education, my apartment with Tasha, even the belief that hard work would be enough, all crumbled with a single phone call. "Don't worry, Amara," Uncle Leon had said at the funeral, his arm around Aunt Denise's shoulder, both wearing the kind of practiced concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Family takes care of family. You'll come stay with us until you're back on your feet." I should have felt grateful. Uncle Leon was my father's older brother. He and Aunt Denise had a nice house in the suburbs, with a guest room that had been empty for years. But from the moment I stepped into their basement bedroom, surrounded by storage bins and the smell of mothballs, I felt like I'd stepped into a trap. I wasn't a beloved niece coming home. I was an obligation. Another mouth to feed. A daily reminder of a family duty they never really wanted to fulfill. "College is expensive," Aunt Denise would say at dinner, her voice clipped, her eyes darting across the table like she was measuring how much I was eating. "Maybe it's time you start thinking about more practical goals," she said one evening, stabbing her fork into a limp piece of lettuce. "Girls in your situation need to be realistic. There's good money in service work," Uncle Leon added, always with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "I know some folks who could help you find something that pays well, if you're willing to be flexible." The way he said flexible, the look that passed between them, it made me feel dirty. Like there were things I didn't want to understand, but knew I had to. I was 19, grieving, and completely dependent on them. Where else could I go? They found me a job at a coffee shop near campus, just to help you get back on your feet, they said. But I knew better. They wanted me to work, to contribute, to carry my weight, and to remind me every day how far I'd fallen. Each morning, I woke up in that cold basement room, surrounded by boxes I didn't have the heart to unpack. I'd drag myself through a shift, forcing smiles at customers who had normal lives, worried about midterms, weekend parties, whether their favorite show had dropped a new episode. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured out how to pay for school, get my life back on track. I had no idea my real life was about to begin. His name was Isaiah Freeman, and the moment he walked into the brew corner, everything changed. The brew corner was both my escape and my prison. It was close enough to campus that I could still pretend I belonged in college. It stayed busy enough to make the hours fly by, but quiet enough during slow shifts that I could sneak in some study time behind the counter. The familiar sounds of steaming milk, clinking mugs, and the grinder became the white noise that softened the chaos in my head. I'd been working there for 2 weeks when everything shifted. It was a Tuesday morning. Rain tapped against the windows. Like impatient fingers, that's when I saw him. He was sitting at the corner table, dark tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. Reading the Financial Times like every line mattered. Silver strands peppered his close-cut hair, and his deep brown skin contrasted against the crispness of his shirt. He held a simple black coffee with both hands, like it was grounding him. He was beautiful in that dangerous way older men sometimes. The kind of beauty that didn't come from youth, but from power. From knowing who you are and not needing to prove it. There was something in the way he sat. Like every movement had purpose. Every decision was his to make, and everyone around him knew it. When his eyes lifted from the paper and met mine, my whole body froze. His gaze was sharp, deep brown, but with golden flecks that made them gleam, focused, unblinking, like he was studying me. My cheeks flushed before I even understood why. I dropped my gaze, suddenly wiping down a table that was already clean. But I could feel his attention like heat on my skin. When I glanced back, he was still looking, Not smiling, not smirking, just watching. As if he was solving a puzzle I didn't know I was a part of. Something fluttered in my stomach, not fear, not really. Recognition, awareness. For the first time in months, I felt like a woman. Not a grieving daughter, not a burden. That's when Uncle Leon stormed through the front door, loud, angry, like always. There you are. His voice boomed through the quiet cafe, making heads turn, conversations stopped. All eyes on me. His expression twisted in a way I recognized too well. The public humiliation was coming, and he didn't care who saw it. You think you can ignore my calls? Pretend like you don't have responsibilities. My face burned. I could feel customers watching. And him, Isaiah, I could feel his stare, hot and heavy. We need to talk about your attitude, Amara. You're living in our house, eating our food, wearing clothes we buy. And this is how you repay us. Uncle, please, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Can we talk about this later? No. We talk now. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist tightly, too tightly. Denise found you a better job. Real money. You start tonight. You'll be grateful. The way he said it made my stomach twist. I knew what he meant. I'd overheard enough, whispered, conversations to understand what kind of jobs his friends offered girls like me. I like working here, I managed to say. I'm not taking another job. What you want doesn't matter. His grip tightened. Pain shot through my wrist as his fingers dug into bone. You'll do what's best for the family that's supporting you, or find another place to live. That's when I felt it again, the weight of Isaiah's eyes on me. I looked up. He was watching, jaw clenched, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. He wasn't just witnessing, he was registering everything, every word, every bruise, every tone. When Uncle Leon finally stormed out, throwing out one last threat about discussing this properly at home, I stood frozen. Isaiah stayed. He didn't touch his coffee. He didn't go back to his paper. He just watched me quietly, as I wiped a table with shaking hands, trying to pretend I hadn't just been embarrassed in front of half the cafe. My wrist throbbed. I didn't dare look at the red marks I could already feel forming. He stayed for another hour. Just sat there. When he finally left, he placed a crisp $20 bill on the table for a $4 drink, and under it, he left a card. Isaiah Freeman, C.O. Freeman. Holdings on the back, in elegant handwriting. If you need help, call me. The next morning, he was back, same table, same suit, but this time, he ordered his coffee black, no sugar, and looked up when I brought it over. Thank you, he said, and when our fingers brushed, my breath caught, just a soft touch. But it was warm, grounding, electric. Completely inappropriate, and unforgettable. You're welcome, I whispered, praying he couldn't hear the tremble in my voice. Amara, he said. I blinked. Surprised, he gestured to my name tag with a small smile. I'm Isaiah. Just Isaiah, no mention of the previous day. No small talk about the storm I'd been dragged through. Just presence.com, stillness. But in his eyes, there was something more, and my pulse refused to calm down. He came back every morning that week, same table, same time, same quiet energy that filled the room. Like low music you didn't realize you were dancing to. Our conversations started small, the weather, coffee preferences, favorite artists. But even in those surface words, something deeper was always waiting just beneath. He listened when I spoke. Really listened. Not the way men usually listen to young women, half interested, half distracted, but with real attention. When I mentioned my interrupted art history degree, he didn't flinch or change the subject. He leaned in, eyes warm, asking about my favorite period. Renaissance art. I said on Wednesday, flipping through a textbook I'd brought for my break. All that patronage, he murmured. Wealthy men supporting beautiful things. His gaze found mine. Though the artists themselves, they weren't always appreciated. Too young, too bold, too unconventional. No, I agreed, feeling something shift between us. But some patrons recognized their value, even when the world didn't. Despite the age difference, he added. Despite the rules, he said it casually, but the way his eyes held mine, it wasn't about art anymore. It was about us. By Friday, I wasn't just waiting for his visits, I was counting the minutes. That morning, when he arrived at exactly 8:15, my heart jumped. I felt ridiculous. Like a teenager, but also alive. "You seem tired," he observed gently, taking his coffee from me. "You're okay?" I tried to smile. "Just didn't sleep well." He studied me. His brown eyes were sharp but soft, the kind that made you feel seen and safe at the same time. "Rough night." "Something like that." He nodded slowly. "Bad family situation." I hesitated. There it was again, the way he asked, as if he already knew, like he'd been thinking about my life far more than any customer should. "Something like that," I said, not ready to explain. Isaiah's jaw tightened slightly, and he looked down at his coffee, like it was helping him control something burning inside. "Family should protect you," he said finally, "not diminish you, not tear you down to keep themselves standing." The truth in his voice made my throat tight. Why did this man, a billionaire who could be anywhere else, seem to care so much? Why did every word he spoke make me feel like I mattered? "I should get back to work," I whispered, suddenly overwhelmed by how much I wanted to tell him everything. "Of course." He stood, his presence, even in motion, was commanding. "Same time, tomorrow?" he asked, but his smile already knew the answer. There was something dangerously certain in that question, like he already saw the next chapter in a story. I hadn't dared to start writing yet, and I didn't stop him, because I wanted to turn the page too. That night, I thought about him, his voice, his eyes, the calm power in his presence long after I should have been asleep, but sleep wouldn't come, because I could feel it. Something was changing. And I didn't know if I was ready. Everything changed the night Uncle Leon decided to take his control to another level. It was just after closing. I was wiping down the espresso machine, the last customer, long gone. When I heard the bell chime, I turned and froze. Uncle Leon, Aunt Denise, both standing at the entrance of the brew corner, like they owned it. His expression was smug. Hers was tight with satisfaction. And I knew, I could feel it in my bones, something bad was about to happen. "Time for a family meeting," Leon announced loudly, walking in like he had the right to. "I'm working," I said, trying to keep my voice calm as I wiped down a counter that didn't need cleaning. "Not anymore," Aunt Denise said with a sharp smile. "We found you a better opportunity. More money, flexible hours. The kind of work that appreciates a girl like me." Her tone made my stomach churn. I knew what kind of opportunity they meant. I'd heard them whisper about the kind of places Uncle Leon's friends ran. Clubs, lounges, places where young girls learned fast that cocktails were just the beginning of the service. "I'm not quitting this job," I said, my voice firmer now. "I like it here." "Yes, you are," Leon snapped. "There's a spot open at this club. Downtown, they need cocktail waitresses. Tips are great. The work's easy if you know how to smile, right?" The way he smiled at me made my skin crawl. "No," I said, louder. "You don't have a choice," he growled. "You live under our roof, eat our food, wear clothes we bought. You'll do what we say, or pack your bags." Aunt Denise crossed her arms, her face stone cold. "The manager expects you at 9. Wear something tight. First impressions matter." When the cafe door opened again, Isaiah walked in like he had been waiting for this moment. He was wearing a charcoal coat, still dusted with rain. His shoulders were squared, jaw set, eyes locked on the scene in front of him with unflinching focus. "I'm sorry," I said instinctively, "we're closed." He didn't even stop walking, Mr. Freeman. Uncle Leon said quickly, changing his tone like a switch had flipped. "We were just finishing some family business." Isaiah's eyes didn't move from Leon. "From outside," he said calmly, "it sounded like you were threatening a teenage girl." "She's our responsibility," Aunt Denise cut in, but the confidence in her voice was already fading. "We were discussing her future," Leon added. "Career prospects." "Her future," Isaiah said, his voice deadly quiet. And does that include forcing her into sex work? The words dropped. Like thunder. Leon turned red. It's cocktail service at a strip club, Isaiah finished for him, his tone cold as ice. I know the kind of places you're talking about. I also know exactly what those opportunities mean for girls like her. You can't interfere in family matters, Leon barked. Isaiah's eyes narrowed. Actually, I can. He looked at me now, and his voice softened without losing its steel. Amara, get your things. You're coming with me. You can't just aunt, Denise started, she's 19. A legal adult, Isaiah said, cutting her off without raising his voice. She can go wherever she wants. Unless, Amara, do you want to stay here? The question felt like freedom. No, I whispered. I'll get my bag. As I gathered my things from behind the counter, the apron, the name tag, the small notebook I kept tucked in the drawer, I could hear Isaiah speaking to them quietly. I couldn't hear the words, but the way their faces paled told me everything I needed to know. Ready? He asked when I returned. He positioned himself between me and them like a wall, a shield. I nodded. Let's go home, he said. Home. The word hit me so hard it made my chest ache. I followed him out into the night, not as a barista, not as a burden, not as a broken girl, but as someone who was finally being seen. Someone finally being rescued. Not for what she could offer, but because someone believed she deserved better. Isaiah's house wasn't just a home, it was a revelation. Modern, warm, calm, clean lines, dark wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city lights, like a private art exhibit. Every room whispered wealth, but not in the loud, flashy way rich folks usually liked to show off. No gold, no mirrors. Just depth. Thoughtfulness. That the guest room he led me to was bigger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Tasha. It had a private bathroom with marble tiles and soft grey towels. A reading nook by the window that overlooked a garden glowing under the street lamps. I stood in the doorway like I was afraid to step inside. Like I might ruin something. Is this really okay? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Isaiah turned from where he'd been adjusting the blinds. He looked at me, really looked, his deep eyes serious. You're safe here, for as long as you need, he said firmly. This is your home now. No expectations, no conditions, no debts to repay. The word home did something to my chest. It made me realize how long it had been since anywhere felt like mine. I can't pay rent, I murmured, looking down at the carpet like it might swallow me whole. I'm not asking for rent. I'm asking you to let someone take care of you for once. His voice was gentle, but there was no room for argument in it. When's the last time anyone did that? Put your needs first. I couldn't remember, since my parents, even then, they needed me to be strong, focused. Their hopes had weighed heavy, even wrapped in love. I'd always had to be the one planning, pushing, making it. But Isaiah, he was offering something I didn't even realize I needed. The chance to breathe. To be 19 without fighting for my life. Why are you doing this? I asked. The question burning in my throat. Since the moment he walked into the cafe that night, he was quiet for a long time. Then finally, he said, because you deserve better than what they were giving you. Because you. He stopped, shook his head, slightly, then looked back at me. Because I can, and that should be enough. In the weeks that followed, I experienced something I hadn't felt since my parents died. Peace. Isaiah arranged for me to audit art history courses at the university. Covered the fees without ever making me feel like it was charity. He treated it like an investment, like I was the investment. Like my education still mattered. Our daily routine unfolded naturally. Breakfasts together before he left for work. Quiet dinners in the evening where he asked questions about my classes, my thoughts, my favorite artists. We spent late nights in his library, both of us reading, sometimes not even talking. Just being. But beneath the calm, something else lived between us. Something electric, something charged. His eyes would linger a little longer than necessary. My heart would skip whenever he walked into a room. He kept his distance. I could feel the effort it took. Like he was constantly checking himself. like there was a line between us that he'd drawn in his mind and was determined never to cross. I started watching him more closely. The way his jaw clenched when I laughed. How his hands would curl into fists when I sat too close. The way his breath caught when I stretched across the couch in my pajamas. He was fighting a war I was slowly learning I didn't want him to win. One night, we were watching a documentary on Renaissance art. Something slow, quiet, and intimate. He sat stiffly at the far end of the couch like his body was made of concrete. "You don't have to stay all the way over there," I said softly. "Yes, I do," he replied, not looking at me. "You're 19. You've been through trauma. The last thing you need is some older man taking advantage of your vulnerability." The words came out tight, like he'd rehearsed them. "What if it's not vulnerability?" I asked, staring at the screen but not seeing it. "What if it's something else?" He didn't answer, so I leaned in, just a little. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't." "What?" "Don't make me want you." The way he said it, like a plea, like a prayer, made my heart pound. I was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Too late," I whispered. Isaiah stood suddenly, running a hand through his hair, his chest rising and falling, like he'd just run a marathon. "I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened. And you're going to let me." And then he left the room, but I saw it. The way his hands shook, the restraint in his shoulders. Isaiah Freeman, billionaire, master of control, was breaking, and I was the reason living with Isaiah felt like standing in the middle of a slow-burning fire, safe, but always just a breath away from being consumed. Every accidental touch, every brush of his hand against mine when he passed me the sugar, every moment his voice softened when he said my name. It built something between us that words couldn't explain. It wasn't fast, it wasn't wild, it was intimate, quietly explosive, and it was driving me insane. I began to notice everything. The way his eyes darkened when I walked into the room, the subtle shift in his breathing when I stretched out on the couch, the clenched fists when I walked past him, in nothing but leggings and a hoodie. Isaiah wasn't indifferent. He was suffering, and I wasn't innocent either. Every night, I'd lie in that soft guest bed, just down the hall from his room, wondering what would happen if I got up and knocked on his door. What would he say if I told him I wanted him? Not because I was confused, or grateful, or scared, but because I saw him, the man, not the billionaire, and I wanted all of him. One morning at breakfast, he looked up from his coffee with that too calm tone that always meant he'd been overthinking. "You're distracted." I forced a smile, "Just tired." "You should get out more, see people your age, make friends, have college experiences, parties, dating." It sounded forced, like he didn't believe a word he was saying. What if I don't want experiences with people my age? The question left my mouth before I could stop it. It wasn't planned. It was raw, honest. Isaiah's hand paused mid-air. With his mug, he blinked, and for just a second, I saw something crack in him. "Amara, I'm not a child," I said, standing slowly and moving around the table toward him. "I know what I want." I was close now, too close. Enough to see his pupils dilate. Close enough to feel his restraint unraveling. "I think about you," I whispered, my voice trembling. At night, when I should be sleeping, he closed his eyes, jaw clenched. "Don't say things like that." "Why?" "Because it makes you want something you're trying to pretend you don't." His eyes opened, and everything in them, hunger, guilt, control, fire, made my breath catch. "It makes me imagine things I have no business imagining. Things I've fought every day since I brought you here." I leaned in, heart pounding. What if they're not wrong? What if they're exactly right? He stood so fast, his chair scraped the floor. His hands were shaking. And then, like he had rehearsed it, his phone rang. "Freeman," he answered, voice cool, perfectly composed, but I saw it. His hands were trembling like leaves in the wind. We were past the edge. There was no going back. Later that week, I was in his study looking for a book when something slid behind the desk. An envelope. I bent down to retrieve it. But what spilled out nearly made me drop everything. Photographs of me at the coffee shop. On campus. In the university library. All taken from a distance. Professional quality. And some of them dated from before we'd ever spoken. Before that day, Uncle Leon humiliated me. Before Isaiah ever accidentally walked into that cafe, my hands trembled as I picked them up, my heart cracking open. He'd been watching me, following me. Planning this. I didn't hear him enter the room. Amara, he said. I looked up, and the photos fell from my hands like shattered glass. His face went pale. We stared at each other. Neither of us moved. Let me explain, he said finally, his voice calm to calm. Explain what? I snapped. That you were stalking me? Investigating me? Watching my every move before we ever even met? It's not what it looks like. It looks like I was a project. Some rescue fantasy you engineered. No, he said, stepping toward me. I stepped back. Was any of it real, Isaiah? Or was all of this just some rich man's guilt trip? Did it make you feel better to save the poor barista girl with the dead parents? The pain in his face looked real, but my trust had been cracked in half. Let me tell you the truth, he said softly. You mean there's more? I whispered. Yes. And then, he told me. Isaiah stood there in the doorway, framed by warm light and cold silence, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. Less powerful, more real, and completely broken. My ex-wife's name was Monique, he said quietly. She was a civil rights lawyer, spent her life helping women escape situations where they were powerless, trapped, hurt, used. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. She used to come home with stories that made her cry. Girls who were trafficked, controlled, shamed into silence. She said men like me were part of the problem. You, I whispered. Not because I hurt anyone directly, he said, jaw clenched, but because I looked away. Because I used my power to protect myself, never anyone else. I wrote checks, donated, thought that was enough. He paused, but it wasn't. Monique left me because she said I couldn't truly see suffering. That, someday, I'd be faced with it right in front of me, and I'd have to choose who I was going to be. He looked me dead in the eye. Then I saw you. The words knocked the air out of my lungs. You were standing behind that counter, trying to smile while your uncle grabbed your wrist like he owned you. And all I could hear was Monique's voice telling me this was the moment I had to decide. So you had me followed, I asked. Isaiah looked down. I needed to know what I was walking into, who your uncle was, what kind of danger you were in. Yes, I had someone watch you. Not to hurt you, not to seduce you, to protect you. He took another step forward, voice breaking. But I didn't plan to fall for you, Amara. I didn't plan any of what came after. How do I know that? I said, the words shaking in my mouth. How do I know it wasn't all just some sick plan to play hero? To control me without touching me? Because if it was a plan, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I wouldn't have fought so hard not to touch you. I wouldn't have begged you to see people your own age. I wouldn't have walked away when I wanted nothing more than to hold you. Silence stretched between us. Then he said it. I fell in love with you, Amara, while trying not to. While trying to be better than the man Monique said I was. My breath hitched. The man who had saved me had also lied to me, but he loved me. That much was clear in his trembling voice, in the guilt etched into his face, in the way he stood there without trying to defend himself anymore. Still, the trust between us was shattered. I didn't know what was real anymore. I need space, I whispered. Isaiah nodded slowly. His eyes never left mine. The apartment I offered you before, it's ready. No strings, no rent. Just space for you to figure out what you need. I nodded once. And that afternoon, I packed my few things, left the mansion, and walked out into a world that felt colder than it had in weeks, because for the first time, I was truly on my own. But maybe that's what I needed to know, who I really was. The apartment Isaiah had prepared for me was stunning, all soft grey walls, polished hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline. It was the kind of place that screamed independence, control, safety, but inside it felt empty. That first night, I sat on the couch, takeout container in my lap, staring out at the lights like they might somehow answer all the questions burning inside me. Who was I now, without my parents, without college, without Isaiah? I spent the next few weeks learning the answer. I got a job at a local art gallery, part-time, low-paying, but mine. I enrolled in night classes with money I applied for through grants and student loans. No help from Isaiah, no help from anyone. I wanted to stand on my own. Not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to be sure that I wasn't just in love with the idea of being rescued. The calls from Uncle Leon started right away. First angry, then apologetic, then manipulative. Word had gotten out about my connection to Isaiah Freeman, and suddenly, my existence mattered to people who used to look right past me. Even people from campus, girls who used to ignore me, boys who never gave me a second look, were sliding into my DM, pretending they cared. But the only message I was waiting for never came. Isaiah didn't call, didn't text, didn't send flowers. He gave me exactly what I'd asked for, space, and somehow, that made it worse. 3 months passed. I learned that I loved abstract expressionism more than I ever liked Renaissance art, that jazz clubs made me feel alive in a way museums never had, that I could talk to strangers at networking events without shrinking into myself, that I could make rent, that I could survive, but surviving wasn't the same as being whole. One night, I was standing in the gallery after closing, watching a middle-aged couple admire a painting called Golden Silence. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. They moved around each other like music, like gravity, like they'd been doing this for years. They reminded me of us, me, and Isaiah. Even though we were never officially anything, we were something deep, something real. That's a beautiful piece, the woman said, glancing at me. It is, I replied, my voice softer than I expected. The artist painted it for his wife. 30-year age difference. Everyone said it wouldn't work, did it? She asked. They were married for 40 years. That night, the ache I'd been holding back finally cracked open. It wasn't just about missing Isaiah's house, or the protection he gave me, or the money, or the safety. I missed him. The man who asked about my dreams, like they mattered. The man who looked at me like I was more than the worst thing that ever happened to me. The man who fought himself to protect me, even when it broke. Him. I picked up my phone, hands trembling, and dialed the number I'd never forgotten. It rang once, twice. Amara. His voice was cautious, careful, but there was hope buried beneath it. Hi, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. I was wondering, would you like to get coffee? He paused, then softly said, as equals, I promised, my treat. Silence stretched for a moment, then he replied, I'd like that very much. And just like that, hope came rushing back into my chest. The cafe I chose for our meeting was nothing like the brew corner. It was brighter, louder, full of noise and people, and normalcy. I didn't want a place haunted by memories. I wanted something neutral, honest. A place where two people could sit across from each other and decide, without pressure, what came next. When Isaiah walked in, my breath caught. He looked exactly like I remembered, tall, poised, polished. But there was something different too, less guarded, less perfect. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping much. You look good, he said, sitting across from me. So do you, I replied, noticing the new lines around his eyes. Though you look tired, I am, he admitted, without hesitation. Turns out, guilt doesn't sleep much. Is that what this is? I asked. Guilt. He took a deep breath, stared into his coffee like it held all the answers. Among other things, regret, missing you. Wondering if I broke something I can't fix. I missed you too, I said softly. But I needed to figure out why. Missed you, he looked up, pain flickering in his eyes. And I realized I didn't miss the comfort, or the house, or even the safety. I reached for my cup, steadying myself. I missed you, Isaiah. The man who made me feel seen. The man who never once made me feel small. His lips parted slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I needed to know that I could stand on my own, that I wasn't in love with my rescuer, that I was in love with the man. Silence wrapped around us. I want to try again, I said, my heart pounding. But differently this time. His brows lifted slightly, and I saw the flicker of hope. No more savior and survivor. No more guilt and gratitude. I want us to be equals. He nodded, voice rough. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I have conditions, I said, setting down my cup. I keep my apartment, I pay my own way. I finish school on my own terms, and we move slowly. Like any other couple, you already have my respect, Amara, he said quietly. Then prove it, I challenged. Court me, take me on dates. Let me say yes to you, not fall into you. Isaiah leaned back, processing. I can do that. Good, because I also want honesty. If the power dynamic ever feels off, we name it. If something feels unfair, we fix it. He smiled, real and warm. Deal. And one more thing, I said, lifting my cup in mock toast. You're not allowed to stalk me again, he laughed. Fair. That night, for the first time in months, I went to sleep with peace in my chest. Our next few weeks were different. From anything we'd experienced before, Isaiah picked me up in his own car, not a driver. He insisted on Dutch treat. He listened more than he spoke, and he laughed. Not the polite chuckle I remembered, real laughter that lit up his face and made him seem younger. We talked about art, music, family. We watched indie films at cheap theaters and danced in dimly lit jazz lounges. We held hands in public, and for the first time, I didn't feel like his project, I felt like his partner. You're different, I told him one night as we walked through the park, the air sharp with fall. How so? Less guarded, more human. He stopped and looked at me, his hand tightening around mine. That's what love does when it's earned, not assumed. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was deep, patient, full of everything we had fought to become. Weeks passed, then one crisp November night, after an art exhibit I helped curate, we stood outside my apartment building, under the glow of streetlights. Thank you, I whispered, for giving me time to become someone I actually like. Isaiah cupped my face gently. Thank you, for coming back. I want you, I whispered, and this time, he didn't walk away. He kissed me with months of longing, of waiting, of holding back. And when we made love that night, slow and sacred in the moonlight pouring through my bedroom window, it wasn't about power or guilt or rescue, it was about love, real, earned, equal. 2 years later, I stood in the same gallery where I'd once worked part-time, but this time, I wasn't staff, I was the featured artist. My exhibit, Unlikely Harmonies, explored beauty found in contrast, old and young, broken and healed, shadow and light. Inspired by my story, our story, Isaiah watched from across the room with pride in his eyes and love in his posture. At 51, he was still the most striking man in the room. But now he was mine, not because he saved me, but because I chose him. After the guests left, he took me to the beach house we bought together, and under a silver sky, he dropped to one knee in the sand. Amara Bennett, he said, voice thick with emotion. Will you marry me? Not because I saved you, not because you need me, but because two people who love each other should build a life as equals. Yes, I whispered. Yes, 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 yes. We married in the garden, where we'd first talked about trust and fear and possibility. My best friend Tasha was my maid of honor. Uncle Leon and Aunt Denise sent their congratulations. Late and polite. I didn't need their approval anymore. 18 months later, I gave birth to our daughter. We named her Monique. Not just to honor the woman who helped awaken Isaiah's conscience, but to remember that love, when it's chosen freely, when it's built slowly, when it's rooted in respect, becomes the kind of legacy no money can buy.